"You're nothing," my sister screamed across the dinner table, her voice shaking the wine glasses and cracking open years of resentment. "My name is Rachel Hayes. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the only thing more satisfying than surviving years of lies is watching the liar unravel when the truth walks in, wearing a robe." It was supposed to be a small, intimate family dinner. At least that's how Nora sold it. We hadn't all sat together like this in years. Dad, Nora, some cousins, and her fiancé Jason. I came because Dad asked. Because he looked tired lately. Because I didn't want him to feel the tension between his daughters was unfixable. Big mistake. From the moment I walked in, Nora was performing. Hair done like she was going to an award show. Fake modesty dripping from every smile. "Oh Rachel, that's a lovely dress. So simple." Translation: "You look poor." Jason was polite. He poured me a glass of wine and asked how I'd been. Before I could answer, Nora leaned in. "Rachel's between things right now, aren't you? We're all just trying to be supportive." Supportive? I felt my jaw clench but kept my mouth shut. Jason blinked, confused. "Between what things?" She laughed like it was an inside joke. "You know, jobs. Stability. She's trying to figure it all out." I said nothing. Because when someone's built their world on lies, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let them keep talking. Through dinner, Nora dropped jabs like flower petals. "You remember when Rachel crashed my car in high school? She was so sensitive back then. She always needed so much space. It was like she was hosting a roast and I was the uninvited punchline." Then came dessert. Someone asked Jason how wedding planning was going. That's when Nora snapped. Jason made an offhand comment. Something innocent. "Maybe Rachel can officiate if we can't find someone last minute." Nora slammed her spoon down. "Oh my God, Jason. She can't even hold down a real job. Why are we pretending she's anything?" Everyone froze. "She's nothing," Nora shouted. "She always plays the victim." She was fired. She had a breakdown. "You think she's some big deal?" I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just picked up my wine glass, swirled it slowly and took a sip. Jason stared at me. Then blinked. "Wait," he said slowly. "Rachel Hayes." I looked at him. "Yeah." He turned pale. "Judge Hayes." Nora's fork hit her plate like a gunshot. I watched her eyes scramble to catch up. But Jason was already turning to her. "Why didn't you tell me your sister is the new circuit court judge?" The silence was symphonic. I set down my glass and said nothing. Because I didn't have to. The truth had arrived, and it didn't need an introduction. People think betrayal happens in a single moment. A slap, a scream, a cheating partner. But sometimes betrayal is slow, quiet. It comes disguised as love that never shows up. That was my sister Nora. Growing up, we were two sides of a coin. She was the polished one. Sparkly. Social. Everything about her screamed approval. I was the shadow she stepped on to shine. When Mom died, I was 15. Nora was 17 and already mastering the art of making tragedy revolve around her. People brought casseroles and whispered, "Poor Nora, she was always so close to her mother." No one noticed me standing in the hallway, silently folding the laundry. I never had a meltdown. Never skipped school. I just disappeared. Dad tried, but he was grieving too. Nora? She filled the vacuum. She became the voice of the house, the face of the family. She told people what I needed before I could speak. "She's fine," she'd say. But I wasn't. I drowned in silence. Books became my life raft. I found refuge in the law, in things that made sense, that followed rules, that didn't twist or twist back. By the time Nora was partying through college and dropping out of 2 majors, I was working 2 jobs to keep my scholarship. He came home to attention. I came home to, "Could you fix the Wi-Fi?" Even then, I kept believing maybe it would change. That if I just achieved enough, I'd finally matter. Law school didn't fix it. Passing the bar didn't fix it. And when I got appointed to the bench last year, the youngest woman in the district to do so, I still didn't tell her. Why? Because I knew she'd find a way to ruin it. To Nora, my success was her failure. My light threatened the spotlight she'd hogged for years. So I stayed quiet. And she filled the silence with her stories. She told people I dropped out of law school. Said I'd had a breakdown. That I'd gotten fired. At one point, she even hinted to Dad that I was dabbling with drugs. When he confronted me, I couldn't even find the words. I just laughed. He was so convincing. And why wouldn't she be? She'd been practicing her whole life. The family believed her version because she always said it with a smile. I never corrected her because I thought the truth would rise on its own. But the truth needs a voice. That dinner wasn't the first time Nora tried to erase me. It was just the first time someone else finally saw through her. Jason's words, Judge Hayes, weren't just a title drop. They were a mirror held up to every lie she'd ever told. And the look on her face? It wasn't just shock. It was fear. Because her world, the one where I was small, broken, invisible, was about to shatter. And I hadn't even raised my voice yet. You don't realize how far lies travel until they start circling back. After that dinner, I started connecting the dots, not just of Nora's outburst, but of the subtle damage she'd been doing for years. A week earlier, I ran into one of our old classmates, Monica, at a coffee shop downtown. She stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. I heard you were, still figuring things out, she said carefully. Figuring what out? I asked, genuinely confused. After the rehab. Rehab? I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I looked her in the eye. I've never been in rehab, Monica. She blinked. But, Nora said. That was the moment I realized the full scope of it. Nora hadn't just tried to control how our family saw me. She'd been rewriting me for anyone who would listen. Quietly. Strategically. Whisper by whisper. In her version, I was the cautionary tale. The failed lawyer. The unstable one. The embarrassing sister they kept off camera at holidays. That explained so much. The pitying looks from family friends. The way Dad had started talking to me like I was fragile. The lack of invitations to things like bridal showers, reunions, even birthdays. And I had let her do it. Why? Because I didn't want to stoop to her level. I thought staying silent made me strong. Dignified. But silence lets liars breathe. The day after that dinner, I went through my texts and emails. People I hadn't heard from in months were now reaching out. Asking how I was. Asking if what they saw at the table was real. One message stood out from Jason. I had no idea. He told me you were, between things. I feel like an idiot. I didn't reply. Because his confusion wasn't my responsibility. But it got me thinking, how long had Nora been hiding my success from him too? She was engaged to a man who worked in the district attorney's office. Someone who literally read my judicial orders. And yet she'd managed to keep him in the dark for almost a year. That wasn't just insecurity. That was a campaign. Nora had built an entire narrative where I was the broken one. Because as long as I stayed small, she could feel big. But now the cracks were showing. Jason had seen my name in legal memos. He just never connected the dots. Never had a reason to. Why would he, when the woman he loved told him I was just family, and nothing more? Now he was questioning everything. And so was everyone else. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to correct every lie. All I had to do was exist in the light. And the shadows Nora lived in would collapse all on their own. Because truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand up and let people look. You'd be surprised how much damage you can do with a smile and perfect timing. I didn't storm into that dinner to make a scene. I didn't walk in swinging truths or armed with receipts. I just waited. Because people like Nora, they hang themselves with their own rope. All you have to do is give them the stage. After Monica mentioned the rehab rumor, I spent a night replaying every interaction Nora and I had over the past few years. The text she never replied to. The family calls she forgot to add me to. The birthday party I wasn't invited to must have been a mistake. It was never a mistake. Nora had been isolating me systematically. Not by force, by narrative. She cast me as unstable so that anything I said would sound like a lie. So I stopped speaking up. Stopped correcting her. And that silence, she used it as proof. But that was before I became Judge Hayes. And now I had something stronger than defense. Evidence. Still, I didn't want to scream it. I wanted her to dig her own grave, with all her charm and cruelty on full display. So I said yes to the dinner. I arrived early, carrying a nice bottle of Cabernet and a small smile. I wore a sleek black turtleneck, no robe, no badge, just me, polished and quiet. Nora greeted me with that signature smirk. "Oh, you came." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." Dad hugged me tighter than he had in years. That was my first signal. The lies hadn't worked as well as she thought. Dinner was in full swing when I made my first move, subtle but precise. I opened my purse slowly and placed my phone and wallet on the table beside it. My business card, the one with the words Judge Rachel Hayes, 9th District Court printed clean in bold, just peeked from the edge of the wallet flap. Jason noticed it first. He glanced, paused, but said nothing. The second move. I played polite. I let Nora speak over me. Let her dominate every conversation. Let her laugh about how some of us just weren't built for law school. I watched as she offered backhanded compliments like hors d'oeuvres. And every time someone asked what I was doing these days, I just smiled and said, keeping busy. Because I knew what was coming. The third and final move. I let her break. It didn't take long. Nora's ego was like a balloon, pretty, inflated, and dangerously thin. All it took was Jason joking about me officiating their wedding for her to pop. You think she's qualified to officiate anything? She snapped. She's nothing. That was it. Checkmate. Jason's face changed. He looked at me. Really looked. Then came the moment. Rachel Hayes. Wait. Judge Hayes. Everything stopped. Because the setup wasn't just about making her fall. It was about letting her fall on camera, with a room full of witnesses. And now it was time to watch the show. Rachel Hayes. Wait. Judge Hayes. Jason's voice didn't just cut through the noise. It redefined the room. You could hear the collective gasp. The weight of every lie Nora had ever told dropped onto that table like a concrete brick. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her hand hovered mid-air, still holding her fork. Her eyes bounced between me and Jason like she was trying to find the script. But her lines had vanished. Jason turned to her. Why didn't you tell me your sister is a judge? I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just stunned. Like a man waking up in someone else's story. She stammered. She's not, that's not. I finally spoke. Calm. Precise. Measured. I was sworn in last fall. 9th District Court. Jason's eyes widened further. I've seen your name. On suppression motions. You ruled on that DNA backlog case, didn't you? I nodded once. I did. Across the table, Aunt Michelle put her hand to her chest. Wait, Rachel, you're the youngest judge in the state? Savannah, our cousin, whispered, but Nora said. Everyone was looking at me now. Except Nora. She was staring at her plate, her cheeks blotched with red, her lips clamped shut like she could seal in the shame if she just didn't breathe. Jason slowly pushed back from the table. You said she didn't finish law school. Silence. You said she had a breakdown. More silence. You said she got fired. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because now the evidence was alive. Breathing. Undeniable. Jason stood. I've worked with your court, he said to me. I never made the connection. Well, I feel stupid. I looked at him gently. You're not. You just trusted the wrong person. He stared at Nora, who still hadn't looked up. Is any of it true? She didn't answer. Didn't dare to. And that was the answer. He picked up his coat. Excuse me. And just like that he left. Everyone watched him go. No one said a word. I sipped my wine. Set the glass down. Let the silence stretch. It wasn't awkward, it was clarifying. My father looked across the table at me. His expression unreadable. Finally he said, Why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes. Because I wanted to earn something without it being taken apart before it even had a chance to grow. He nodded. A slow, almost ashamed nod. Aunt Michelle reached over and grabbed my hand. I'm so proud of you, Nora. She still hadn't moved. Still clinging to the last illusion of control like a drowning woman holding an anchor. Her dinner was cold now. Her voice. Gone. Because for the first time in her life she wasn't the narrator. And the truth? It had a new author. When someone's lie collapses in public, they don't fall quietly. They unravel in waves. Jason left the dinner table, but his footsteps echoed. No one touched their food. The roast chicken might as well have been glass. No one dared to move. Nora finally stood. Wobbled actually. I need to. I'll be right back, she muttered, avoiding every eye in the room. We all heard the front door swing open. And then came the yelling. Muted at first, then louder. Jason's voice, sharp and incredulous. Her voice, frantic. Words like explain, lied, humiliated, cut through the cool night air and bled into the dining room. No one tried to help her. Because the people she'd weaponized for years were now seeing her clearly. And once you see clearly, you can't go back. Aunt Michelle set her fork down gently. She told me you were depressed. That you'd dropped out. I believed her. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I nodded. She told a lot of people a lot of things. Dad leaned forward, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I didn't know, he whispered. And for once I believed him. He looked at me like a man trying to unlearn a false gospel. All those stories Nora fed him about me being too emotional, too fragile, too difficult to explain. She made me feel like loving you meant hurting her. I blinked. That was the most honest thing he'd ever said. I didn't hug him. Didn't cry. I just said, now you understand why I stayed quiet. Outside, a car door slammed. Nora came storming in, red-eyed and wild. I cannot believe you ambushed me like that, she snapped. I looked at her. You screamed I was nothing. That wasn't an ambush. That was you, detonating yourself. She scoffed. You've always wanted to humiliate me. I smiled, cold, deliberate. I didn't want to humiliate you, Nora. I wanted peace. But you made war. And now you're losing it. The room stayed dead silent. She looked around, pleading, desperate, but no one met her gaze. Not Aunt Michelle. Not Savannah. Not even Dad. She'd been caught. And for once there was no one left to spin the story to. Jason's just confused, she muttered, grabbing her purse. He'll come around. He always does. I didn't correct her. Let her have her fantasy for now. Because reality? It was already waiting for her outside. As she slammed the door behind her, Aunt Michelle raised her glass. To Judge Hayes, she said softly, with just enough bite to make me laugh. Everyone followed. Even Dad. For the rest of the night no one talked about the wine. Or the food. Or the centerpiece Nora had spent hours bragging about earlier. All anyone could talk about was the lie that finally died. And the woman who didn't just survive it. He buried it. After that dinner I didn't hear from Nora for a while. She vanished the way people do when the curtain drops and the lights come up. Exposed, raw, and suddenly aware there's no encore. But me. I didn't vanish. I emerged. Because the moment Nora's lies shattered, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in years. I had never needed her approval. Only my own. So I got to work, not in court but in my own life. I started mentoring at-risk law students at the local university. Young women, mostly the kind who reminded me of myself. Quiet, overlooked, brilliant. The kind who'd been told their silence was weakness. One of them, a first-year named Deja, asked me over coffee, "How do you handle people who try to make you feel small?" I looked her dead in the eye. By refusing to shrink. She smiled like I had just handed her armor. That was the beginning of something. I started getting more invitations, to speak at panels, to teach guest lectures, to attend scholarship galas where my name was no longer just on a guest list, but on the marquee. People who once knew me as Nora's quiet sister, now introduced themselves like they were honored to be in my presence. And still I didn't gloat. I just moved forward. I bought a house, not massive but elegant. A view of the lake. A small library for my mother's books. A garden that I watered myself. The kind of life built by a woman who no longer needed to explain herself to anyone. I also bought Dad a new car. Quietly. No ribbon. No grand gesture. Just a note on the dashboard that said, "For the man who finally listened." He cried when he read it. "I don't deserve this," he said. "I know," I replied. "But I'm giving it anyway." Because I wasn't carrying grudges. I was carrying freedom. Meanwhile, Nora's world dimmed. Jason didn't come around. In fact, he ended the engagement. Quietly. Professionally. Like someone who had just escaped a beautifully decorated prison. Nora's Instagram went dark for a few weeks. When she reappeared, the tone had changed. Fewer filters, more self-reflection quotes. She posted one photo of a sunset with the caption, "Not everyone will clap when you grow." Cute. But I knew the truth. She hadn't grown. She had been exposed. And as for me, I wasn't playing defense anymore. I wasn't explaining why I disappeared from family parties or justifying why I never shared my wins. Now I celebrated openly. Because I realized something life-changing. I wasn't rebuilding my name. I was rewriting the narrative. Word by word. Ruling by ruling. Room by room. And every woman who'd ever been silenced, ignored, or rewritten. She saw me. And in seeing me, She started seeing herself. A month later, I received a message from Nora. Not a call. Not a voice note. Just a long, carefully typed email. It started with, "I've been doing a lot of thinking," and ended with, "I hope someday we can sit down and talk." In between were paragraphs of half-truths and semi-remorse. She never actually said I lied. She said things like, "I was hurting, and I didn't know how to deal with your success." There it was, the confession she wouldn't quite name. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to. Nora's words didn't hold weight anymore. Her silence had once been my prison. Now it was just background noise in a life too full to notice. That morning I walked into Chambers like I did every Monday. My clerk smiled as she handed me my schedule and a pale blue envelope. "No return address," she said. Inside was a handwritten letter from a young woman named Leah, a public defender fresh out of law school. She'd seen me speak at a legal conference. She wrote that hearing me talk about surviving silence gave her the strength to fight her first wrongful eviction case. "I won," she wrote. "And I kept hearing your voice in my head the whole time." I held the letter in both hands. No one was clapping. No cameras. No dinner tables full of judgment. Just me. At my desk. Breathing in the kind of peace you don't earn from approval. Only from truth. Later that afternoon, I passed by a courtroom where an old family friend was arguing a civil case. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me and said to the judge, "Sorry, Your Honor. I just noticed Judge Hayes walked in." I nodded politely. The other judge smiled and replied, "Yes. We're lucky to have her." That night I made dinner alone. Lit a candle. Sat at my table. No shouting, no smirks, no desperate performances. I took a bite of roasted chicken and poured myself a glass of wine. As the clock ticked softly, I thought about that dinner with Nora. The insult. The plate. The fork. How she'd looked at me when Jason called me Judge Hayes. Like the earth had betrayed her. Like the universe had rearranged itself just to spite her. But it hadn't. It had just finally made room for the truth. And the truth? It didn't need a scream to be heard. I looked around my quiet home. My career. My name unshakable now. And I whispered to myself, "You called me nothing, and I became everything." I lifted my glass to no one. And toasted the woman I'd always been becoming.